Hey there, we're back with another episode of Common Knowledge, the show where I take a look at 10 common Magic the Gathering cards, tell you if they're any good in the Pauper format or not, and that's it. That's just kind of what the show is. Let's see what our first card of the day is, and you can get a better idea. Meteorite. It's 5 mana for an artifact, and when this artifact enters, it deals 2 damage to any target, and you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. Not great. The only real place that I'm even potentially even considering it would be a Tron deck, because I can make lots of colorless mana relatively easily in a Tron deck. But we just have so many other effects that Tron would rather play than this. We just got Giant's Boulder in The Hobbit, which is really good, it seems. You could do something like Universal Solvent, which is also a rock that comes down really early that then you pay and sacrifice later to destroy a target permanent. There's Scour from Existence, that's an instant that can exile target permanent, including lands, and that's pretty cool. This does stay on the table. It does add a mana of any color once it's there, and it is a removal spell, even if it is just 2 damage. Barrels of Blasting Jelly, also another card to consider. That's probably a little closer to something like this, where it's making the mana colors for you, or it's filtering and not, instead of just ramping like this one is. But it does have a direct damage piece to it as well. It's tough. Here's the other problem with Meteorite. You want to play this as soon as you can because it's a mana rock, and so you want to continue building up your mana, but you also want to hold it because it's a removal spell. So if your opponent, and often they will, but your opponent might have a creature out there that would be worth killing when you have enough mana to play this for the first time. Great. I pay 5 mana, I bring this down, it hits one of my opponent's creatures, and now I've ramped myself. That's ideal. There are going to be times where your opponent has no creatures on their board, or maybe some creatures that are very inconsequential, or maybe some creatures that are just really big to the point that they won't even go down to a meteorite. They won't. They'll take they'll take the 2 damage and go, what else you got? So in those instances, what do? Do you not play the meteorite and hold it in your hand and wait for a better target, but not get the ramp to potentially give you more mana for things that you could do on subsequent turns? Or do you play it into an unoptimized board in a very inefficient way and have that ramp, but have lost the opportunity for the removal? And that's what I really don't like. That is probably the thing I don't like about it the most, because those other cards that I mentioned don't have that issue. You play those cards early. Giant's Boulder you play on turn 1. You scry a couple when it enters. That's great. You can filter the whole time it's out there, and then you can decide whenever you need to use the destroy effect at instant speed. Barrels of Blasting Jelly, same way. You put that out early, it keeps filtering your mana, and then you decide, okay, it's time to pop this thing and take out one of my opponent's creatures. So Meteorite does have that downside, even though it feels like it's an upside. Look, it does 2 different things, but those 2 different things don't necessarily gel all the time. And that causes friction in your game plan and gives your opponents more opportunities to either, outramp you, or to keep a creature alive when, you might have been able to kill it on a different turn. Yeah, that puts Meteorite in a weird spot. I think I'm going to give it a 2.3. It is a really expensive mana rock too, and I think once you have the mana to cast it, a lot of the uses of doing 2 damage to a creature is not as useful anymore. This needs to do more damage to a creature. It does say any target. You could always just throw it at your opponent's face, but that also feels like a bit of a waste. I just don't like it. I don't like it. I what did I say? 2.3? That sounds about right. Next up, Rise to the Challenge is 1 in a red. For an instant, target creature gets +2/+0 and gains first strike until end of turn. I feel like we just saw a card like this. Not this card exactly, but basically. Was there one in Hobbit maybe that kind of just does this? Was there like a Smog card, or the the card about killing Smog. Not the Desolation of Smog, but what if I... Let's just look at all the cards that say Smog. Smog's Fury, there you go. So the 1 in a red, target creature gets +3/+0 and gains reach and first strike. That's pretty good. This is just worse. This is way worse than a card that we have right now. So already pretty bad when you got something that's way better than it. And I also feel like there's just probably other options that are better than this too. I'm gonna go with a 2.4. In a vacuum, it's fine, but again, we have Smog's Fury, and even then, that's not even a card we're really playing in the format. But if you wanted this, you have better options available to you. Next is Varchild's Crusader, which is 3 in a red for a 3/2 human knight, and it's got a 0 mana ability. That's always interesting. This creature can't be blocked this turn except by walls, but you have to sacrifice this creature at the beginning of the next end step. I like 0 mana abilities because you can just keep activating them. But that's in this case that doesn't really help you because the activation is not doesn't compound at all. You just continue to not be able to be blocked except by walls. I mean, if you really need to get that damage through, this is a way to do it, but having to lose the creature, yeah, this is pretty bad. 4 mana for a 3/2 that I was gonna say has no evasion, but it does. I mean, it literally has evasion once. What are the other arts for this one? Yeah, I like both of these arts, but I think they picked the right one for the Masters Edition. Yeah, this is pretty bad. I'll give it a 2. Not quite a 1 territory. You know what? Maybe it does. Maybe it does have to go into the ones. Yeah. A 4 mana 3/2 that ends up sacrificing itself, even if it does a little damage. Yeah, I think that dips down into like a 1.8 range then. Let's go with that. Fear of Death is 1 and a blue for an enchantment aura that enchants a creature. When this aura enters, you mill 2 cards. An enchanted creature gets -X -0, where X is the number of cards in your graveyard. I think the easiest thing that might pop in your mind is, oh, well, this could go in something like Terror. And it could. Mills you cards, that's useful. You will have a lot of cards in your graveyard, so you can play this on one of your opponent's creatures, and then you'll maybe give them -10 -0, so you can pretty much blank one of your opponent's creatures. That's okay, but you just don't need it. You don't need it in Terror, mono blue or otherwise, because this itself is an enchantment. So if this got milled into your graveyard, that doesn't help you with casting your Tolarian Terrors and your Cryptic Serpents, and you're putting down 5/5s and 6/5s really early. You kind of don't care what your opponent's creatures are. Your creatures are generally going to be bigger than anything your opponent's putting down. So this ends up not actually being that useful in the deck that you might consider it. And I'm really struggling to think of other decks that might want this. We certainly have decks that care about the graveyard and can put stuff in the graveyard, but we just have blue removal at this mana cost and sometimes even cheaper that is just a whole lot stronger. Unable to Scream, I think, just beats this out pretty handily, unless you really care about the self-mill part. I don't necessarily think that you do. I'm just going to give this a 2.2 and move on. I really don't think it's very good. Gloom Stalker is 2 and a white for a 2/3 dwarf ranger. As long as you've completed a dungeon, this creature has double strike. That's not that great. 3 mana for a 2/3 that's pretty vanilla until you've jumped through a decent amount of hoops. There's not a lot of dungeon stuff in the Pauper format outside of the initiative, which is a dungeon. The Undercity is a dungeon, so if you do complete that, then this guy gets double strike. But there are a couple issues with that. There's kind of only one way to get the initiative, and that's with the Avenging Hunter. So now you have to be in a Selesnya deck to be able to play both of those cards there. And The Undercity's big. That's the other problem. They made a big dungeon, and so it takes a lot longer to get through. And so you're gonna have a whole lot of turns that you've probably already won the game at that point if you've kept the initiative that long that you're continuing to go through and finish the dungeon. You've either already won or are really close to winning. So at this point, you don't need this creature. And while you're waiting for all that, this is just a 3 mana 2/3 that doesn't do anything else. And I think that's bad. I'm gonna go with a I'm gonna go with a I was gonna say 2, but I think it is so narrow that it has to dip into the ones. Let's go with a 1 point. I'll go with a 1.9, but I'm not a big fan. Selesnya Sanctuary, though, I am a big fan of. But we have done these bounce lands before. I'm not going to count this one, but the bounce lands are great. Selesnya Sanctuary specifically is a land that enters tapped. When this land enters, you return a land you control to its owner's hand, and it taps for green and white. Taps for Selesnya mana. Really, really cool. Came out in the original Ravnica set, and these lands can do really neat things. Because they can be a real target. I would say in Commander they're more of a target because there's a little bit more. I guess there's not as much land destruction because it's pretty frowned upon. But there are ways of destroying lands with things like Demolition Field that are fine. Like destroying non-basic lands is normally okay in the Commander format. And you'll also see some of that in Pauper as well when you have decks like John Wildfire that are playing Cleansing Wildfire, and there are a handful of other cards, and Stone Rain is also just available in the format. There are some Panza style decks that are looking to destroy lands. These feel like a real target because these things tap for 2 mana. It's one land that taps for 2 mana. That's really good. That's like a Soul Ring, right? Soul Ring's pretty good. Banned in a lot of formats and or restricted in a lot of formats, and not something that you can play in Pauper because it's too good. So these are really good lands. There are other good parts about them though. Even when they enter tapped, they're bouncing another land back to your hand if you have an ability of playing more lands on a single turn. So if you had something like the what's it called? The Arboreal Grazer. If you had an Arboreal Grazer that comes in play and lets you put a land into play, there are also some elves and some snake shamans, I think, from Kamigawa that can just tap and allow you to put another land into play. So you could potentially play this, bounce a land back to your hand, tap that creature, or play the Arboreal Grazer that lets you put down another land and then put that land back into play. That can be pretty cool. This can bounce specific lands with maybe ETBs that you'd really like. So if you need the, you could do a bounce or not a bounce land, a gain land, and bounce a gain land, play the gain land again on a next turn, and gain that life again. You can bounce a Bajuka Bog back to your hand, and then play the Bajuka Bog and exile your opponent's graveyard again. These are all really good things. The other thing that I want to mention about these lands is that they really do they help you not need as many lands in your opening hand, at least. They'll kind of fix your draws. I guess they don't fix your draws. How do I want to put that? Okay, here's the idea. You draw a hand of 7. It's got 2 lands in it, 2 basic lands. Sometimes that'll be fine in the Pauper format. Sometimes you have enough cheap cards that you go, yeah, two lands is fine. Maybe I'll find a third. I would say in most formats, you kind of want to have 3 lands or know that you can get to a third land to feel good, to feel like, oh, I can play a lot of the cards in my deck and I can keep on moving. If you have a land, a basic land, and one of these in your hand to start the game, you're gonna feel a little better because now you have a land drop for turn 1 by playing the basic. You have a land drop for turn 2 by playing this and bouncing the other one back to your hand, and now you have a land drop for turn 3 as well. So now you kind of are more comfortable with having fewer lands in your hand because the lands themselves are doing more. You're still making land drops each turn. You do have to worry a little bit. You have to have things to play, maybe for that 1 mana on turn 1 or turn 2 before you bounce it back to your hand, because you could potentially have more than 7 cards in your hand if you play this and bounce a land back to your hand. You might have more than 7 and have to discard one of those. Maybe you're a deck that wants to discard a big card into its graveyard to reanimate later. I don't know. There's plenty of things that you could do. These lands are really good. They have a lot of good upsides and a few notable downsides. But overall, I think the pros outweigh the cons. They're really, really good. Again, I'm not I'm not counting this one because we've definitely done these lands. I probably said this spiel a whole time before, if not twice. But I love these lands quite a bit. I'll give them like a 8.1. Yeah, I really, really like them. But we're skipping them to get on to Stronghold Discipline, which is 2 and double black for a sorcery. Each player loses 1 life for each creature they control. That's kind of cool. Pretty expensive. Also sorcery speed, so you're only playing this on your turn. It'd be really nice if I could, what is it, like Rakdos Charm? Rakdos Charm's the Rakdos Charm. Nope, got to spell it right. That is the thing about Scryfall. You have to spell things right to find the right cards. So Rakdos Charm can do this at instant speed. Each creature deals the damage to its controller. Not in the Pauper format, but just thinking about cards that can kind of do this effect. So sorcery speed kind of sucks, especially when I'm paying 4 mana for it. I don't think it would. I don't think it'd be asking too much to make this instant speed. Especially because you still give your opponent a chance to respond to it by sacrificing creatures if they needed to, or whatever. But if you're going up against a go wide strategy and you're not playing nearly as many creatures, this can be a big swing of life. You can hit your opponent really hard and not get touched too much on your side. Kind of cool. I like this in black. This is a cool black effect. Score wise, it is very narrow. It's really only good against the decks that are playing a lot of creatures. And I would say creatures are generally pretty well played in this format, but you're going to go up against some tough matchups where this is not very good. And I would say more of the matchups that aren't very good, especially in this meta right now, are the ones that you're probably going to go up against. I don't know, like Affinity, I suppose. Affinity puts a lot of creatures down really cheaply, so this could potentially get them. This isn't going to be nearly as good against something like Terror, which doesn't have a whole lot of creatures that it plays. It really relies on having 1 or 2 big guys that come in. Trying to think of other things. Jund Wildfire probably is still pretty good against this. Your opponent can sacrifice the Eldrazi spawn tokens to make the Writhing Chrysalis bigger, and then they don't have to worry about. Then they have fewer creatures on their board to take less life. Yeah, I just think there's. Mono Red Madness doesn't have a ton of creatures that it's playing. Doesn't really need them. It's cool, but it's not good enough to really see sideboard play. And if it's not seeing sideboard play, it's not seeing any play. Let's go with let's give it a 3. Kind of a weak 3. Yeah. Next up, Pestermite. Haha, what a card. Pestermite is 2 and a blue for a 2/1 fairy rogue with flash and flying. And when this creature enters, you may tap or untap target permanent. Pestermite has some really cool combo potential with Kiki Jiki. Not in the Pauper format, but in things like Commander, or I suppose that would have worked in Modern. Maybe it still does. I don't know. I don't play Modern. That's way too expensive for me. But the idea here is that you can make copies of Pestermite, which can then untap target permanent, which could untap the Kiki Jiki, so you can tap the Kiki Jiki and make another one, and then you just get this army of fairies that can then swing in the next turn, or the next turn, I suppose, because you can even flash them in on your opponent's well, you can flash this in at the end of your opponent's turn, and then use the Kiki Jiki. Well, hang on, Kiki Jiki. Hang on. And this is very useless Pauper content since this doesn't work there. But Kiki Jiki. Yeah, the token gets sacrificed. Oh, the tokens have haste. Never mind. Sorry, I forgot the tokens had haste. So yeah, you just do it on your turn. The flash speed doesn't really matter at that point, but you just make a bunch of Pestermites. They keep untapping the Kiki Jiki. They all have haste. They all swing in. Yeah, I forgot about the haste. That's silly. In the Pauper format, Pestermite not nearly as good. We don't have ways of making infinite Pestermite tokens. That just doesn't happen. So you see a blue card, you see that it's a fairy, you think, okay, I know a blue fairy deck in the format, and it just doesn't need Pestermite. It's got enough good fairies involved in that deck that it just doesn't need a card that costs 3 mana. It just has way better cards at 1 and 2 mana. I mean, it plays the Ninja of the Deep Hours, which is 4, but you're never paying 4 for it because you're always ninjutsuing it in. Pestermite just doesn't go in that deck. And it doesn't really go in the other decks. If you need to untap permanents, the Guac and Marshmallow Pizza gets played in some combo stuff, but that is a card that, because it only costs 1 mana, you have ways of bouncing it back to your hand and then replaying it infinitely and getting combos like that. And Pestermite's just too expensive and therefore too slow. Even at flash speed, it's still too slow for what we'd need to combo with it in Pauper. Cool in some other formats with other potential combos, but this is not necessarily a very good Pauper card. And it is kind of interesting to see how a card that is really good in one format really isn't that good in another format. Because you normally think if a common card is good enough to be played in Modern, then it should probably be good enough to be played in Pauper, right? And no, because it doesn't have the right supporting players. And this is a good example of that. I'm going to give this a 2.8. Still pretty good. I like the flash. Flying makes it evasive. It still can also tap one of your opponent's creatures or permanent, I guess. So you can tap a land from your opponent and deny them some land. You can tap a big creature down so it's not able to attack you that turn. You can untap one of your permanents to be able to, get mana back. You could see this working well with something like Tron to untap one of your Tron lands or untap a land that has a bunch of wild growths on it or Utopia Sprawls on it. There are cool things that you could do with this, but mostly the things that you could do that are really cool, you have other options in the format that are better than that. So it is neat. I feel pretty good about the what did I say, 2.8, 2.9, something like that. Feel pretty good about that score, but just not quite good enough in this format. Skeletal Snake is 1 and a black for a 2/1 snake skeleton. What other creature type would it be? This is bad. This is bad. Worse than a grizzly bear. Way cooler than a grizzly bear, though. Look at that thing. That's rad. Yeah, not a very good card. This gets like a 1.9. No, worse than that. 1.7. Yeah. Really cool art though. Love that. Aronson. There you go. Aronson's Aura. Easy. So simple. How could anyone mess that up? 2 and a white for an enchantment. You can pay a white and sacrifice an enchantment to destroy target enchantment. That's now the word's losing all meaning. Or you can pay 3 and double blue to counter target enchantment spell. It's funny. It is funny. It is funny, but I think that's all it is. I mean, what are you doing? You're shutting down Bogle's decks. I wouldn't even say shutting them down. Having to pay 5 mana each time you want to counter an enchantment spell is wild, especially if you have to pay double blue in that when you're playing a white card that also has a white activated ability. You only get to do the white activated ability once because it also has to. Well, that's not true because you're sacrificing an enchantment, so you could be sacrificing your own other enchantments, not just this, to destroy enchantment. I'm saying enchantment too much. This card's not very good. It gets a 2.3. Next up, and our final official card of the day is Late to Dinner. 3 and a white for a sorcery. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and you create a food token. It's pretty good. It's better. It's strictly better than Resurrection, which does everything this card does except not the food token part. I mean, if four mana bring a guy back from the graveyard to the battlefield's pretty standard. We see that, Zombify in black does this. So white has a couple of options of doing this too. That's fine. We just kind of have white doesn't have the creatures, the good enough creatures that you really need to bring back. Black can with things like the Troll of Khazad-dûm or the Lotleth Giant. Like you want to resurrect a whole lot more and reanimate those big threats in black. White just doesn't have as many of those big threats at common that matter as much. So the reanimation spells in white are also a little less useful in this format. More useful for a commander table for sure. But in Pauper, I mean, it's fine, but it's not great. I'll give this a 3.2. Bonus card of the day. What do we got? It's a Fleeting Flight, which is a single white mana for an instant. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. It gains flying until end of turn, and you prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to it this turn. That's kind of not bad. For like a mono white heroic deck, this triggers your heroic. It puts a counter on itself. It gives a creature flying for the turn, so that's some evasion. Prevents all damage to it, so you can also use this on defense to give one of your own creatures flying and make it bigger and block an opponent's creature and potentially kill that creature from the opponent. These are good things. There's nothing bad about this card. But is it good enough to see play, to like see consistent use? And I think the answer is no. We've got, if you're playing mono white heroic, you've got some other cards that can put a +1/+1 counter on a creature, but those have flashback to then be able to play them over again. So now you're getting 2 heroic triggers and 2 spells instead of just the one here. I think you will probably end up holding this in your hand a little bit more often than you might think as you consider whether you need to keep this up to use on defense. Yeah, it's tough. Like again, there's nothing bad about this card. I actually really like it, but I don't know if I like it enough where I need to give it a really good score. I think we can go for a 3. Maybe higher. Maybe higher. Maybe this gets all the way up to like a 3.4. Yeah, I'll do that. I can go 3.4. Still don't think it's going to see a whole lot of play in the format. It hasn't yet, and I doubt it will. But there is a deck that, mono white heroic, this could slot in and be just fine. It's probably just like the 79th card you'd play in mono white heroic, and that's you can make a deck of 75. So not particularly great in that deck when you have all those other options available to you. Cool though, and fleeting, like this episode, which is now over. So I'll see you later.